Hi everyone, you are at the Chatty Curator channel and welcome to a special standalone series where me and my friend Lucas are having in-depth discussion about how Australian small, medium-sized enterprise can survive and thrive in the 2020s. How are you today, Lucas?
Good to see you again.
Yes, it's
Interesting topic.
oh gosh, yes, it is. It's actually quite an interesting topic we're talking about. We're talking about production process and organization, and it is a technology side of Impactor. Do you mind sharing an introduction about what is it about?
Sure. So, production process and organisation often it gets neglected in the innovation sphere. Everybody's concerned with product innovation, but production process is the step before you produce a new or significantly improved product. So here we want to look at how we can increase the product solution value with new or improved production processes, also organizational practices and maybe organizational structure. So we combine those in.
I see. And well, there are a lot of questions when it comes to that. Are we going to lean a little bit more towards something of a something with a industries with a product more a little bit more in this episode?
Yeah, that's right. So the original research that I came up with here was on the food and agribusiness, medtech, pharmaceutical, and advanced materials or manufacturing. So obviously there's got to be an investment in facilities, production, and capital. So this one, it's for companies that make or produce tangible products. It's applicable for SaaS companies if they provide services to these manufacturing companies as well. You always have to have an understanding of what the client's facing at the coalface.
There you go. Well, let's talk about operation and facility when it comes to production. So I think there are a few different factors that we need to think about before or during the time that when we think about innovating or reviewing our process. What's the first one you want to talk about?
Yeah, sure. So it's a big topic. So for each factor, we look at enhancing or transforming. But for production process, we'll just start with enhancing. So an enhancing innovation is going to strengthen your existing production processes, organizational practices, or structure. And the idea is improve business performance and increase the solution value. And interestingly, production process benefits are experienced first. So there's usually a lag before you get increased measures of performance and good products. And that makes sense, right? So if you implement something new into your factory, there's a period of time before it leads to a new or significantly improved product. And that product then leads to financial market outcome measures of performance. So it's an important one to tackle because we need to look for those indicators that tell us that we're in the right direction to improve performance.
And I think during our very first video before this series of the Get Chatty About Your Local Businesses, we talked about the gap between R&D and marketing. I think this could be one of the things that can help building that bridge because you can actually identify where you can improve. So obviously, well, of course, today's episode, we talk about the enhancing side of this factor. And there are things that are tangible and there are things that are not. So should we have a little overview about those two?
Yeah, good. So first two questions, just as you said, the first key question to ask is, have you identified and assessed the tangible or situational conditions under which your organization operates? And we'll have a look at those.
Okay.
The second question is, have you assessed the intangible factors that contribute to business performance and might fluctuate over time? The third key question is actually, after we've done that, can we perform a SWOT analysis so we can match our resources and capabilities to opportunities in the external environment and minimize threats? So a good old SWOT analysis to finalize up the enhancing impact of production process.
Well, I don't know about you, but a lot of people that I work with that they have their SWOT analysis written down before they start the business, but most of them up 6 months in, everything's different after they have a little bit of experience of that. But that's part of it. Like, you trial and
That's
error.
the main thing, isn't it? And that's why business planning has changed for startups. Things like lean canvas, business model canvas, the old one pages, because you can produce all the most fantastic Excel spreadsheets in the world. But you're right, 6 months in, the
and
forecasts aren't what you thought.
and the thing is, sometimes it is about setting up expectation, and having these, identifying these different conditions can actually help, no matter what size of business, to know what's happening.
We would say to companies, so no matter whether they're starting or 6 months or 5 years in, we would say, have you identified and assessed the tangible conditions?
Mm,
And to be effective there, we need to assess situational factors. And some of those include, for example, does your organization have the capacity to operate 24 hours a day? Where are your clients? How are you giving them the support? The age and life of your business equipment. So if remember, we've already spoken about we don't need to own assets anymore. It's sometimes beneficial to just have control of those assets, because you can have warranties and replacement drive much more efficiencies and less capital on your books. So the equipment you're using, what's the age, the life expectancy? Do we need to replace? Capabilities of staff. Okay, of course, your human resources critical to operating all your production and capital, goes hand in hand. So are you
well,
upskilling and training those staff?
and when there's
Lots
staff,
of
there's
questions.
industrial relations.
Yeah, the industrial relations is an interesting one. So, I mean, if you just think about the fact we looked at operating 24 hours a day, okay,
Hmm?
so how do you pay your employees? How does that? How do those wage increases change for night shift, weekend, public holidays? We know that the Fair Work Act is obviously a strong thing that has to be abided by. So, all of these things impact your tangible, situational facilities and production.
And the tangible part of it, that, is an overview. It is about your operation, about your premises of how where your production is, or and what helped that production line, which is like, for example, your equipment, your machines, and everything, and also your people. And that's a lot. That's a lot to think about.
It is, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes, again, I say that SaaS companies have it easy. If you're making the investment into tangible technology, production locations,
Hmm.
you've got to evaluate things like SWOT analysis become much more important, because the costs of getting it wrong are higher, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I agree, because the overhead can be quite crazy, and obviously that, it sounds like that intangible, factors can be less costly in a way, but we still need to have a really close look at it. Like, are things going to change over time? And things are changing
Yes.
quickly. Quickly. I mean,
Yes.
even we're recording this on Zoom. Zoom start to have a bit of changes since this time last year. Like, when we were recording, they have this little robot voice. This meeting is being
Yeah.
recorded, and these are the changes. One of them, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, if we look at the changes with technology, so when I was working at Rip Curl, the surf company, started there in 2003, spent 5 years there. So we were still buying servers, so
Mm,
physical servers. So we had a capital outlay for the technology infrastructure. There'd be an email server, a web server, there'd be CRM server. Nowadays, as you know, the barriers to entry are lower. So we
mm,
subscribe to cloud-based platforms, which are still servers located somewhere else, but just
yep.
not in our facilities. So those barriers to entry are lower.
Mm.
Um, but of
And
course,
the
it changes all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, based on those, for example, SaaS product, or different kind of intangible, resources that you can build on, more intangible resources, for example, your brand, or what's the reason, what's the buying factor, why people buy your stuff. And those are important. Those are very important, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So if you think about the rumors of manufacturing being dead in Australia, we know that, we're just becoming more advanced, and part of that is the brand and the belief in the
Mm.
product, whether that's food, which we know we've got such great quality food, and innovations coming out of agri-tech, and now we're making big inroads in biomedical technology and
Mm.
pharmaceuticals. So those two industries really spring to mind as having that brand and intangible value attached to products and services.
Yeah. And the thing is, once you got the brand, then it's about building your image and your perception. And it is important because sometimes that we think we know our audience or we think we know our customers. But once you've gone through all of your, like gone through a few months of operation or gone through interaction with your client, you know that there can be a perception that was built without your knowledge. And sometimes it worked for you, sometimes it worked against you. So that's why it's important to communicate that brand image to your customers. And hey, that's where marketing come in, or publicity, depending on some.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
It becomes a little bit harder, I think, for B2B manufacturers when they're just supplying a part or a component. It's more those network relationships and who they know and how well they fit into the value chain. So there it's a little bit different. You might be able to give me
Yeah.
advice for
Oh
B2B
yeah.
marketing, the way you're approaching and communicating your brand. It's once you've got a presence and you've got runs on the board, it's easier, isn't it? To
Hmm.
get an initial inroad is quite difficult.
Well, I mean, one of the good examples I have is that sometimes depending on the the the, the age group of my client, then there's a different way you communicate with them. It's different. It's just the way that they are. And sometimes it's not just about getting the image out there. You need to know what your capability is, and then you can work it out. And then that's why, because that's how you build trust. That's how you got customers to come back, particularly when it comes to a B2B, particularly with manufacturing, be it B2B. That because imagine that if equipments for surgery, they're not going to randomly pick someone on Google. You need to build that trust.
Yeah.
You need to have that right branding. I mean, just imagine that if someone with a horrible scandal popping up, that's not going to help.
Yeah. I was talking to a company a few weeks ago that has an active dry yeast product that increases the
Mm.
quality of red wine, and he was telling me that he has to deliver through intermediaries, particularly in countries like China before the tariffs
Of
were up.
course.
But those relationships can take
Yeah.
years to build and hold on to. It's not something that a glossy brochure is really going
Yeah.
to penetrate new markets for him.
Well, I mean, once your glossy brochure that attract people to talk to you, then for SME, many people that the owner or the operator or the person who in charge of sales, that's the face, that's the ambassador of
Yeah.
your brand. And they gotta match the message. Otherwise that it will be like, what? Because there are some not very consistent messages around. And then when you'll be like, oh, I'm not going to trust that. We should talk about the SWOT analysis because this is
Yeah.
where we identify which tangible and intangible factors that needs to be looked at, isn't it?
Yeah. So the SWOT analysis is criticism of late. One of the criticisms with SWOT analysis is that your strengths and weaknesses are considered current. So you're looking at your current capabilities, and then opportunities and threats are sort of into the future. So they're saying there's a disconnect. But I think that any time you're actually going through the process of analysis, you're going to get benefits, whether it's a
Mm.
SWOT, whether it's a PESTEL environmental analysis, whether it's writing a business plan, it's always going to be beneficial. So start by looking at the strengths, and some of the strengths you might have. You might have patents, you might have the ability to protect your IP. As we said, strong brand name, good reputation through
Yep.
your customers. These sorts of things you can build on, because you have to think about your strengths in relation to your competitors or the substitute products, because once you identify those strengths, they're the ones that you focus on.
I Many of the small businesses I work with, I often ask them the question why you start your business, and actually that's usually is the question that talk about kind of like an opportunity or threat part of it, which is like,
Yeah.
were there any gaps that you found? And that's why you start your
Yeah.
own business. And that's actually a really good starting point. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why the SWOT is so useful. So once
Mm.
you've got your strengths, and then you can identify opportunities, you match your strength to the opportunities. You've identified threats, and then you use your strength to mitigate or minimize that threat. So that process of matching up strengths and weaknesses to opportunities and threats in a simple table, you get a few people giving input into that, and you'll come up with one or two strategies you hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
It's a really good process.
If we know as small businesses, if we know what's our opportunities and what's our strength, that's a good way to prevent just trying everything. Because
Yeah,
we don't have
exactly.
the money to try every fucking thing. I mean,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
and then
Just
that's
as you said, what for individuals is just as valuable.
oh
Yeah.
yes, it's a little bit like, okay, I know that you are interested in so many things, which is great, but let's start with what you got. Let's start with what you're good at, and then build upon that.
Yeah, absolutely. And with businesses, you can actually find ways to outsource,
Mm.
looking at what you're not good at, but what you do need to compete, and then who provides it. So in the same way, if you're starting a business and you're a sole proprietor, as you said,
Mm.
look at what you're good at, look at who you know, the connections you have, look at what you've already got, then look at the opportunity. And then if you need to bring somebody else in, well, you don't try and do it all yourself. You bring somebody else in, and that's how success is born, really.
Well, I, I would express that I do understand that many SME or sole traders that sometimes they do want to do a lot and this is their baby.
Yeah,
I understand that. I don't want to disrespect them, but
sure.
sometimes a way to overcome your weakness is about finding someone to collaborate with, or sometimes you just don't want to stretch too thin.
If you've got a good broad range of skill sets, it's good to actually try different things, so that then when
Mm.
you outsource it, you're not getting ripped off.
Yes.
Even if it comes to things like SEO and
Oh,
keywords, like
yes.
people can pull the wool over your eyes and make that sound so complicated. But once you understand what it takes, you don't necessarily have to do it yourself, but you can communicate in the right terms to your service provider and make sure you get a good deal, really.
Sometimes I got because I mean there will be plenty of cold callers or emails and things like that
Oh, yeah.
providing marketing solutions to me, and I know that there's even things that I may be interested in because I don't want to spend too much time on that. But then I was like, well, we do need to look beyond that glossy promotional material and just find out a little bit more about the other person before we collaborate. But sometimes, yes. So collaborating is important. And by knowing your SWOT, having your SWOT analysis, it's a great way for you to spot where you can find that to help you
Yeah,
in your
sure.
business. Yeah.
Maybe we can drop it's called a toes analysis. It's just a table that shows how to match your strengths to opportunities and threats. We can maybe drop that table a link to the
Yeah.
table in the section for our viewers.
So thank you so much, and thank you, Lucas, and thank you for the audience for for watching this. So everyone have a great day ahead.
Yeah, thanks to Chatty Curator. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Lucas.
Oh gosh. Anyway, all right. Well, time to go. And thank you for being flexible today. We'll figure out a time on Thursday, and we can like message each other to confirm in the morning.
Sounds good, mate. All right.
Talk to you then.